Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ushma Neill. I'm here to talk to you about viruses and vaccines, give you a little bit of information that you might need related to SARS coronavirus 2 and the COVID-19 vaccines. And I'm here representing a bunch of colleagues from across New York City, and we are calling ourselves the Vaccine Awareness Coalition. Now, how many cells do you think make up the human body? What if I told you it was actually around 30 trillion cells? Now, those are just human cells. On top of the human cells, there's microbial cells, 39 million, bacteria, viruses, other germs. Now, here's some bacteria. Now, you can see these are single cells. They can hang out on their own. They can divide and duplicate, and they cause disease. Staph aureus, anthrax is a bacteria, the plague, but we can't live without them. We wouldn't have cheese or yogurt. We wouldn't be able to digest meats or vegetables without the bacteria that reside in our gut. Now, viruses are a little bit different. They're teeny tiny. They are infectious agents, but they can only duplicate themselves if they infect a human cell. Outside of human cells, we call them virions. So here's a cartoon of a coronavirus virion, and you can see the spikes that line the outside and give it its name of a corona. Now, there are tons of different viruses out there. In fact, scientists so far have estimated and tracked 10 to the 31, 10 trillion viruses out there. That's a 1 followed by 31 zeros. And I bet you could name some of them: influenza, Zika virus, HIV, and now the SARS coronavirus 2. There's actually, of those 10 to the 31 viruses, only about 200 that infect humans. So how tiny are they? What are they? Well, here's a coffee bean, a grain of rice, and we're getting smaller and smaller here. The human egg is the largest cell in the human body and the only one that the eye can see without a microscope. Now you start to see your red blood cells, and there's some yeast. We're coming up on a bacteria, which is about a micron. And then even smaller than that, remember when I said they were 100th the size? Now you start to see these viruses. They're on the nanometer scale. And smaller we go. Here you'll see an antibody. We'll come back to those later because those are very important in the fight against bacteria and viruses. Down to glucose, which is sugar, water molecules, and even carbon. But how does these tiny things spread? Here's a video of someone sneezing. Now, yes, this is theoretical, but you can see if they don't sneeze into their elbow or have a mask on, stuff gets pretty far out from the human body once you sneeze it. And if you are on the other side, you need to be at least 6 feet away if you don't want to get covered by whatever it is that somebody sneezed out. Now, this is exactly what is behind the social distancing guidelines of keeping at least 6 feet away from whoever it is that you're next to. So how does the immune system work if you are unfortunate enough to get covered in something that somebody sneezed out? Well, your blood has 2 different kinds of cells in it: the red blood cells that deliver oxygen and nutrients, and then these white blood cells that work to survey their environment and try to eliminate anything that is foreign, something they see, like a coronavirus. And if they can't just directly get rid of that virus, they have other means by which to fight off that germ. Do you know what I'm talking about? Antibodies. So there's a special kind of white blood cell called the B cell that creates these antibodies that are very specific to each different foreign thing that they encounter, such that later on, if they ever do encounter it again, they can quickly surround it, tag it, and label it to be destructive. Now, how can you increase your antibody production? Well, through vaccines. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can make vaccines. One that we've used fairly frequently is when you take the whole virus and you either damage it by killing it by heat or a chemical, such that you have the kind of corpus or the body of whatever that virion was from before. This is the strategy behind the Indian vaccine, the Chinese vaccine, and I think the Russian vaccine as well. The other strategy for vaccines is when you introduce just parts of the virus. In this case, maybe one of those spike proteins from outside. And this is exactly what the strategy is for these mRNA vaccines, as well as the one from Johnson and Johnson, where you're providing the recipe actually directly to human cells to produce those spike proteins, such that then you develop an antibody to them. And this is just a temporary production of it. So then the immune system will learn how to fight infection and make antibodies when it sees something that's foreign. And later on, it just has them kind of lying around and ready, such that if you are ever exposed to that virus, those antibodies can quickly attack the virus and tag it for destruction. So, how do we know that they're safe? Well, we go through some really rigorous clinical trials and testing of vaccines before anything is allowed to be injected into the human body. Let me walk you through what clinical trials are like. So, in phase 1 trials, you have 20 to 100 healthy volunteers that are testing the questions: is this safe? Is this actually giving anybody any side effects? And if we're giving dose 1 and dose 2, are the side effects worse with dose 2? And is it actually leading to an immune response? In phase 2, if the data from phase 1 was really positive, you start to move into hundreds of people where you're looking at what are the most common side effects. Is the body actually mounting any kind of an immune response? And is it actually protecting the people who got the vaccine? Then in phase 3, you're moving into thousands of people where you're asking one specific question: are the people who got the vaccine protected against, and are the people who got the placebo or just like a saline shot getting actually sick? And how well is it able to protect it? Now, phase 4 is when the regulatory bodies go through all of the data, including what happened during the trials, as well as afterwards, to study any side effects. What happens in a pandemic is an EUA, an emergency use authorization, where a vaccine is going to be approved on a faster timeline. And this is only used if there's no other alternative treatments that are ever available. So here's again in pictorial form what a regular vaccine review looks like, and it takes about 10 years. So you have your preclinical work that's usually in animal models and then starting to go from small numbers of people into thousands. And then the regulatory review takes a lot longer than the 6 weeks that they take to accelerate their review process during an EUA. And usually only after a vaccine is approved through regulatory approval would a pharmaceutical company start to manufacture that vaccine. Because think about it, why would you create a product that you might have to throw away if it doesn't meet regulatory approval? So what happened in the COVID-19 vaccine development? Well, a couple of things. The preclinical analysis went really, really quickly because everyone around the globe was working together as opposed to competitively. Phase 2 overlapped both with phase 1 as well as phase 3 to ensure that we were going through things really quickly. This regulatory review that usually takes onwards of 3.5 years was shrunk to 6 weeks. And furthermore, pharmaceutical companies started manufacturing these doses about a year ago. So as soon as they started seeing that they had promising data from phase 1 and phase 2, because they knew that they were going to have to stock up really, really quickly, and because they had financial assurances from governments around the world. So let's talk through this a little bit more. The researchers didn't actually start from scratch. The SARS coronavirus 2 is very similar to earlier SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, viruses that we've come into contact with before. So we didn't start from zero. Furthermore, everyone around the globe started sharing data in a very, very collaborative fashion from the beginning. We even knew the genome sequence of this virus in January of 2020. Messenger RNA technology isn't actually all that new. Yes, this is the first time that mRNA-based vaccines have been used in humans, but they've been experimented on and used and tested for years and years. And furthermore, as I was mentioning before, governments around the world pledged their support that they would buy the hundreds of millions of doses that these pharmaceutical companies were coming up with, in order to make sure that the pharmaceutical companies wouldn't run at a significant loss if they started manufacturing them. So let's talk a little bit about the three different vaccines that are approved in the United States as of March 2021. We've got the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine that was tested in over 46,000 people at 150 sites around the world and in almost 40 states in the US alone. And what you can see down here is that they tested the vaccine in large portions of ethnically and racially diverse individuals. The Moderna vaccine was tested in more than 30,000 people, and the Janssen or Johnson and Johnson vaccine was tested in over 43,000 people and in countries around the world. Let's compare them a little. So the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is 2 shots 21 days apart, has to be stored at -80, though there's some recent information that maybe it could be stored a little bit warmer than that. The Moderna vaccine is also 2 shots 28 days apart, and it has to be stored at -80, whereas the Janssen vaccine is just 1 shot and can be stored in a normal refrigerator. Now, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is approved for those 16 and older, while the other two for 18 and older, though there are clinical trials ongoing in those 11 and older, and I believe the Janssen vaccine is being tested even in infants. And they have been phenomenal at preventing hospitalization and death. 100% prevention of death when you get the J&J, the Moderna, and the Pfizer BioNTech vaccines. There is almost no difference in the amount of protection here. Yes, the J&J vaccine was showing that it was 85% effective, but honestly, it was also tested in South Africa and Brazil when there were much more dangerous variants at play. Now, herd immunity is a term that you've probably heard a couple of different times. Let me walk you through what this means and show you what it means. In each of these rectangles, you see one black dot in the middle, and that indicates one person who is positive for the virus. They're surrounded either by people in blue who have been unvaccinated or an increasing number of people in yellow who have been vaccinated. Let me show you how much vaccination slows the spread of a virus. Let me show that to you again. When you have no one vaccinated, a virus can spread rampantly and really quickly. Whereas when you start to get above 75% of a population vaccinated, it truly slows and provides a barrier around those who are infected in order to slow the progress of spread. Now, the vaccine does have some side effects. I certainly experienced these when I got vaccinated myself. I had a little bit of injection site pain, and after the second shot in particular, I was lucky enough to get the Moderna shot. I couldn't really do a whole lot the next day. I just wanted to hang out on the couch, but Tylenol and a shower sure did make me feel better. They were side effects that I was willing to tolerate, such that I wouldn't have coughing, shortness of breath, muscle and body aches, the actual things that happen to you when you get COVID-19, loss of taste and smell, vomiting and diarrhea. And honestly, this is a deadly virus. There are an enormous number of people who have succumbed to this virus, even healthy young people. Let me show you a picture of normal lungs as opposed to the lungs of someone on life support after having been exposed to the SARS coronavirus. This virus can lead to hospitalization, long-term chronic pain, and death. In fact, here's a screenshot from Johns Hopkins that's keeping a dashboard of statistics around the almost 115 million people around the globe who have been infected with SARS coronavirus 2, including almost 29 million people in the United States alone. Globally, 2.5 million people have died of this virus, 515,000 in the United States alone. So I think that it's something that we can all do for our communities to protect the people around us. So why have some declined the vaccine so far? Well, they're concerned about side effects, they think that it might not be safe, and any number of other reasons. So let's walk through some of these one by one so I can tell you from a scientific perspective what it is you should be grappling with. So the first myth that we want to talk about is how the COVID-19 vaccine could enter your cells and change your DNA. This is simply not possible. I want you to think about it a bit like a bank. An mRNA or pieces of the virus might ever be able to get into the lobby, but they could never get all the way into the vault or the nucleus where your DNA is. What's another myth? The COVID-19 vaccine is going to impact my fertility. This is again simply not possible. Your genetic materials are never going to be altered by these vaccines or even actually by the virus. There's no impact on your ability to ovulate or create eggs or your ability to create sperm, what's called spermatogenesis. Hundreds of women have gotten pregnant after having had the vaccine during the clinical trials and subsequently, and hundreds, if not thousands, of men have also been able to impregnate women after they too have been vaccinated. What's another myth? This is a long-standing one, that the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and or other vaccines can cause autism. So the article that first made this claim was retracted because it was fraudulent from the start. And the MMR vaccine, as well as other vaccines, have been given billions of times around the globe, and there has been no association with the cause of autism. Another myth that we have heard, well, if I already had COVID-19, I don't need to get the vaccine. Well, you can still benefit actually from getting the vaccine because it's not known how long we have protective antibodies, and this is an opportunity for you to protect yourself as well as those around you. Another myth is I'm going to get microchipped or they're going to put robots in me when I get vaccinated. This is again simply not possible. Remember when I showed you that video of the size of viruses against other common objects? The smallest microchip that we have is about the size of a grain of rice. So think about that. You'd probably be able to feel it, and the vaccine needle is going to be a lot smaller than the needle that would be needed to administer a grain of rice into your arm. And furthermore, your cell phones track your movements in a way that a microchip wouldn't really be able to. So please make sure to turn on all the privacy settings on your cell phone. Another myth, the coronavirus vaccine will give me COVID-19. This is again simply not possible. So all of our vaccines that are approved in the US are delivering to you parts of the virus or giving you the instructions to make parts of the virus. They can never all assemble to give the actual virus to you in order to make you sick. As I mentioned before, there might be some side effects from getting vaccinated, but they are not the same as actually being exposed to the virus. Another myth, if I get the vaccine, I can stop wearing a mask. Well, there's new guidance today from the CDC that groups of people who are vaccinated might be able to stop wearing masks when they're around each other. But you never know who around you is actually vaccinated. And we need to make sure that we're protecting our communities. And the vaccines may not prevent the coronavirus from actually entering your body. What they do is prepare you to fight off any virus that has gotten into you. And it's as yet unknown whether or not those of us who have been vaccinated could still transmit the virus before our antibodies take over. Another myth, if I get the vaccine and I'm undocumented or an immigrant, the government will deport me or I'll never be able to get a green card. We want you to know that New York State and most other states will not and has not reported any data to Homeland Security or ICE other than an aggregate. What do I mean by that? Here's the data on the 3,000 people who have been vaccinated in New York today. It's never about Ushma Neill was vaccinated and here's her immigration status. And when you're signing up for a vaccine appointment, you do not have to give any information about your legal status here. New Yorkers can get this vaccine without any repercussions or thoughts that there would be a way for somebody to come after you because of your immigration status. Another myth, the COVID vaccine was created too quickly and is therefore unsafe, and I don't want to be experimented on. Well, the method to make the mRNA vaccines have been around and in development for years, as has the platform for the J&J vaccine, and they are amazingly safe. And furthermore, there are systems in place in the government that have been around for decades for the clinical trials and the people running them to inform if there did happen to be anything that went wrong or some harm that came to somebody who got the vaccine. And if you think about it, if there's 40,000 people in a trial, if you take any group of 40,000 people, a couple of them during that time might develop cancer. A couple of them might get hit by lightning. A couple of them, something weird might happen to them that's completely unrelated to the vaccine. So there is something called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So anyone who's running a clinical trial, especially around a vaccine, has to give an exquisite amount of data to the government about everything that happened to all of the people in their trial. This is a screenshot from the Moderna trial documents. And what they showed in here was that in their group of over 30,000 people, there were 3 people where something happened to them and they had to report it regardless of whether or not it was because of the vaccine. One person got pneumonia, one person had heart arrhythmia, and another person had other heart problems. One of them, though, was in fact struck by lightning. Now, can you ask yourself, did they get struck by lightning because they got the vaccine, or is that just something that happened, unfortunately, to somebody in a group of 30,000 people? So we want to make sure that you're armed with the sources where you could get reliable information. Please don't go to grandmadoesn'tLikeVaccines.com. We want you to go to places like the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's cdc.gov. Furthermore, another great source of information is the National Institutes of Health, and they have a whole website around COVID-19. It's covid19.nih.gov. Another one here in New York City, nyc.gov/coronavirus has a wealth of information on here about variants, about where to get vaccinated, and what our rates are, especially by zip code. If you want to get stuck into the data and look at what's happening around the globe, Johns Hopkins has an enormous amount of information. Coronavirus.jhu.edu has been a really terrific place to track the numbers around the world. Now, where can you get vaccine appointments? Well, there's a couple of different places. Vaccinefinder.nyc.gov also has the ability to look in multiple different languages. And when you look by zip code, you'll get a map of all of the places around you, and you can explore whether they have new appointments, whether they're vaccinating people in the community, or just those with specific eligibility requirements. COVID19.nychealthandhospitals.org also has a terrific, huge number of vaccine appointments and lists who is eligible. Vaxfornyc.nyc.gov is a terrific place to look, especially around the eligibility requirements. Now, there's a couple of places that are aggregating appointments like Somos Vaccination, as well as TurboVax, that I think also has an app so that you can get instant reminders, especially as soon as a vaccine appointment comes up at one of 45 different sites around the state and New York City in particular. So I hope that that was helpful to you in taking a really quick spin around the coronavirus that we're facing right now in 2020 and 2021. And again, on behalf of my colleagues and the Vaccine Awareness Coalition, I'm Ushma Neill, and thank you for tuning in.